Without further ado, then, we will get started with this second webinar on IPCA governance. As is the tradition of Indigenous people right across Turtle Island and around the world, we will start with some opening remarks by our respected elder and one of our speakers. I would like to introduce Copperjoe. Jack, please do the opening remarks for us.
Chief and Shonikan. Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, it's a big honor and privilege to be here today, taking part in this session along with Russ and Marilyn Baptiste and yourself, Stephen, Nitah, to talk about looking at managing your protected areas. And it becomes more important during these times of pandemics and COVID-19, because in Whitehorse, my grandpa, Chief Jim Boss, took his people away from their village in Lake Labarge over the mountaintops to a place called Black Lake. And he hid his people away for up to 7 years away from Whitehorse, so that they would be able to protect themselves away from this influenza of 1914. So in a way that what we're doing is we're moving ahead, looking at protected areas that would be very important to Indigenous peoples in all their traditional territories across North America. So this is a very key session and topic to be discussing. And at the same time, I just want to just thank all of our guides and protectors that watch over us day and night. Just to say, Chiefs, or thank you to all of our ancestors, to all of our relations that watch over us. Because they give us guidance, they give us that protection that is needed. And for all those people that are listening out there, just to take this time to say your own prayers, because all those people that are taking part in this session are meant to be here for some reason, because we want to work in unison, move forward in a good way, in the light of reconciliation, and more importantly is to begin to do our job as caretakers of the land for the Creator and also for our unborn grandchildren. I thank you for that. I look forward to the session. Good Chief.
Masicho Copperjack. Appreciate your kind remarks and asking for support from our guides, as you put it. Very important that we acknowledge our Creator and the guides that we use as individuals in different nations. Welcome to the second webinar on governance of IPCAs. This is a series of webinars that will go into early 2021. My name is Stephen Nitah. I'm an advisor to the Indigenous Leadership Initiative and a member of the Leadership Circle for the Conservation through Reconciliation Partnership. On behalf of the Conservation through Reconciliation Partnership, or the CRP, the Indigenous Leadership Initiative, and the IISAAK OLAM Foundation, we are pleased to welcome you all to the second webinar of the IPCA Governance webinar stream. On November 4th, we will be hosting our third governance webinar, focused on Dasiqox Tribal Parks. We also have a concurrent webinar stream on legal innovations, which launched in September. The third webinar in this series is on the legal and governance aspects of Xeni Gwet'in. Registration info will be posted on the CRP website soon under the virtual campfire series. You can sign up on the website to be notified about future webinars. Webinars is a tool that we are using in these days of pandemics to reach out, to provide platforms where learning opportunities can be created to support the many IPCA initiatives across the country. The concept was born to replace many gatherings the CRP was planning over 2020 and 2021, but unfortunately travel between communities, provinces is quite dangerous. So these are the tools that we're using now. So a series of webinars on IPCAs and anything to do with IPCAs. Future IPCAs in 2021 will include IPCA financing and Indigenous guardians in their relationship with IPCAs. Some housekeeping items. Please keep your mic muted when you're not speaking. There will be a Q&A at the end of the presentations. Feel free to record your questions in the chat box, and we'll get to as many of them as possible. The webinar has been recorded and will be made available on the CRP website in the coming weeks. Please turn off your video if you do not want to appear in the recording. Who is the CRP? CRP is a Canada-wide partnership of Indigenous leaders, researchers, and environmental organizations working together to transform conservation practice and uplift Indigenous leadership within that space. To learn more about our work, you can visit the website and follow us on social media. Today, I'm delighted to welcome you our second dialogue on the governance of Indigenous protected and conserved areas. Why now? Why important? Indigenous leadership around land relationships is proven today globally to be almost a savior of biodiversity. Today, globally, there's only 25% biodiversity left on Earth. Of that 25%, 80% is on Indigenous people's lands, or Indigenous people's influence or influence lands. Indigenous people don't think of conservation or protected areas when we relate and maintain relationships with territories. It's about the worldviews that we collectively have, even amongst the many different nations of Indigenous peoples across the world. All of us understand that we are part of nature and that we have a responsibility as a dominant being within our territories. We have a responsibility to all living things. We have a responsibility to maintain balance. And that worldview and that sense of responsibility is what's preserving the biodiversity that we have left on Earth. Today, we translate that into protected and conserved areas, not to influence or drive our way of life there, but to continue that. But the protected area boundaries that we create around conservation protected areas, and sometimes like we did in Xeni Gwet'in, partnering with Crown government so that we could use their laws is to manage people. It's not to manage the lands per se. It's to manage each other, regulate each other, and regulate the destructive forces that's part of our lives. Mining, industrial development. There's space for that on Earth, but we have to maintain balance. And IPCAs is a way for us to achieve that balance in Canada. It's a way for dialogue to be created between Crown governments and Indigenous governments, between Indigenous peoples and the general population of Canada, to rebuild the relationships that we started during early contacts, pretty much until 1767. It's a place where reconciliation can happen, and a place where we can start building a better tomorrow, a better Canada. That's the mandate in which our federal government is working with, the mandate that they've gotten in the last 2 consecutive elections. Therefore, it's upon us as individuals, as nations of Indigenous nations, provinces, and individual Canadians, to give life to that mandate. Indigenous peoples of this country have certainly stepped up to the plate in the form of proposing Indigenous protected and conserved areas right across the country. This helps the reconciliation process. At the same time, we're poised to conserve very important biodiversity within Canada, one of the last few places on Earth where there's intact forests, intact biodiversity, huge carbon sinks that regulate carbon that stores carbon instead of going up in the air. That regulates the weather, the climate that we all have to share globally. So, to me, the webinars that we're working with now is to share those information, that understanding, and the challenge that's in front of us and the opportunities. Today, we have some great speakers that's going to speak to land relationship and land relationship planning. We have the honored guests, Copperjoe, who did the opening remarks for us. Copperjoe is a senior planning coordinator with the Yukon Land Use Planning Council. He has 25 years of land claims agreement and self-government agreement negotiations experience. This includes leading complex multi-party negotiations between First Nations, territorial, provincial, and federal governments. Jack is joining us from the Yukon Territory. We have Russell Myers. Russell Myers Ross recently completed his 2nd term as Chief of the Yunesit'in Government in BC. He continues to support Dasiqox Tribal Park, whose vision is based on 3 pillars: environmental protection, cultural revitalization, and sustainable livelihoods. We have my friend, colleague in the Indigenous Leadership Circle, and a colleague as a core member of the Indigenous Circle of Experts, and the authors of the report We Rise Together. Marilyn Baptiste is a former councillor and former chief of the Xeni Gwet'in First Nations government in BC, one of the 6 First Nations that make the Dasiqox Nation, which was awarded the Supreme Court of Canada decision declaring Aboriginal title in 2014. In 2015, she won the Goldman Environmental Prize for helping to shut down Dasiqo Mines Limited's New Prosperity Gold and Copper Mine, one of the largest mining projects ever proposed in British Columbia. Marilyn is a member of the CRP Leadership Circle. Valley of British Columbia remains committed to defending First Nations values on the land and in her community. Copperjoe will start off with a discussion about the land and people's relationship model for building consensus during collaborative planning process. Russ will then share insights from Dasiqox Tribal Park, such as the establishment and governance. Marilyn Baptiste will then discuss how Nenkwe planning is connected to conservation and Dasiqox Tribal Parks specifically. We will have about a half hour of Q&A at the end. So without, before we get there, I just wanted to lay the foundation of how land relationship planning can help define IPCAs, using the Xeni and Nitah as a model. Copperjoe will be digging a little deeper around land relationship planning within established IPCAs like Xeni and Nitah. But for us in Siouxsie, we use the land relationship planning to determine the boundaries and the partners with whom we partnered with to create Xeni and Nitah to co-govern, manage, and operate it together. We have two agreements with Crown governments, one with Parks Canada and one with the Government of Northwest Territories. Using the land relationship plan, we determine the boundaries, and the boundaries of Xeni and Nitah is reflective of the ecological area, the watershed, the different ecosystems that the watershed represented. We made sure that the entire watershed was within the protected area. And within the protected area, there's different interests by the Crown governments. Parks Canada has one of the strongest in legislation for protection. The Government of Northwest Territories didn't have any legislation for protecting large protected areas. They had legislation that that supports roadside parks and picnic grounds and stuff of that nature. So Indigenous governments and the public government working together created the Territorial Protected Areas Act. That act allows for corridors for industrial purposes if other options are not available. So based on those needs and the type of relationships that the Government of Northwest Territories wanted for the public of the North, we determine the boundaries for the Federal National Park Reserve and the Territorial Protected Area and the Territorial Conservation Area, all encompassing Xeni and Nitah. So that's one way to use land relationship plannings, or the needs of the peoples, the needs of the different organizations or within societies, like the mining industry in our case, determines boundaries and types of protected areas and language that goes into establishment agreements. So without further ado, take it away, Copperjoe.
Unmute myself. If somebody wants to bring up my PowerPoint, and we'll share the screen. Okay, this presentation on land and people's relationship model as it pertains to Indigenous, protected, and conserved areas. I present this to you as Yukon, or a TK holder and First Nation elder. That's important to say. That picture you see is my grandpa, Kishoot, or Chief Jim Boss, along with another co-chief, Chief Johnny Fraser. Yukon means to go ahead or to break trail. And I'm very honored to be here. Next. Yeah, how am I connected to this relationship model is that it was created from the teachings that I learned from elder stories heard around many campfires on the land. That started with my mom and dad and we call her little grandma, Akuakakit, whose gravestone you could see sitting beside. Akuakakit was a medicine healer and very well-respected person that used to walk to the coast, she said, before the gold rush over to Tlaloc, Alaska. And behind me is another headstone, Annie Ned. And Annie Ned was a very well-respected elder here in the Yukon, the mother of Elijah Smith, who was one of the founders of the Yukon Land Claims Agreement. And Annie Ned came to see me in my sleep around the 5th draft of the model. So the model has gone through about at least 35 drafts. And I had to listen to my dad's stories of his dad and his grandpa for 30 years before I became a storyteller. And through that walk, I have learned that a storyteller is a messenger in the traditional sense. You become a wisdom keeper from the knowledge you begin to gather, and a TK holder of sacred knowledge, because those stories all have lessons, values, and principles that is meant to share to future generations. So I am just doing my part in this succession of teaching and learning. And hopefully from today's session that the model also will become part of your life, your life walk. Okay, I'm ready. Pass. Right. The Land Peoples Relationship Model is a collaborative knowledge building process that respects both Yukon First Nations, long ago peoples' way and Western knowledge. The model uses 3 key laws and 2 decision-making tools. The 3 key laws of respect, care, share, and the 2 tools I call no voice and the knowledge stream tree that includes the affected parties' viewpoints and long ago knowledge principles. The model directs, balances, and frames the collaborative planning process. And the crux of the model is how respect is shown amongst the participants. And the model also describes a sacred place. Next. Care, share, respect laws that are long ago people's key laws of respect, care, and share were equally and were applied equally and used in combination with other Indigenous laws. TK laws are applied internally first, and then to others, moving outwards towards a broader worldview. For instance, the law would apply to myself. Do I respect myself? Do I take care of myself? Do I learn? And what I learn, do I share in a good way to others so it would be helpful to them? Do I respect my immediate family members, my extended family members, my clan, my community, animals, land, other governments, etc.? So it moves outwards from inside yourself. The model attempts to rebuild healthy relationships between peoples in the land, knowing that reconciliation can't happen if people, as Stephen Nitah said, see themselves as a part of nature and life. That is important. And the model also strives to rebuild respectful relationships between peoples that there be no that no knowledge system, gender, or group is superior to another. Okay, try again. I'm just trying to move this out of the way here. How can I move this to the side or to the top?
Is it the videos that you're having trouble with?
To see some of the wording.
Yeah, so I just like to put my cursor up at the top. There's a bit of a black bar, and then you can slide it along wherever's best for you.
Okay, I'm just going to have you there then. Okay, in regards to the share care respect, this is going to even though respect is taught and learned as the first law, it is not more stronger than other laws. That respect, care, share are treated equally. And the intention here in the model is that you have these three main laws that protects a place that you're trying to get to at the round table. And this place is called your sacred space. The intention in the sacred space is to produce friendly solutions that are going to be beneficial to those that are affected and those participants that are discussing these items at the round table. A prerequisite I see for those roundtable experts is that those people representing your party or government, or party, I mean, it should be in balance. This is not a place that you'd want to have a person that is angry or biased or greedy because you're going to throw the discussion off. It's important that those people are grounded and in balance. As you can see, just a couple examples of other outcomes in regards to these three laws working together. You have relationships, interconnectedness, equity, collaboration, stewardship, restoration. We just took a couple out of a whole page full of these applicable key wordings that describes a relationship between these three laws. And also at the same time, I just wanted to mention that using the English language, these were the words that came the closest to what we're trying to describe. Care is a big word. Respect means to give the highest attribution to everything created by the Creator. Care is to care for one another and the land as directed by the Creator. Share is to share openly and respectfully for what knowledge is passed down to you in a good and respectful way. And also to share those resources you may have carefully in your homeland. Okay, next. Hello?
Hi there, is this the right slide? Collaborative law?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
So this slide, I just wanted to show that an example of Western science speaking of sustainable development. And long ago, people say, take care of the land takes care of you, and take only what you need. So that's our definition of sustainable development. And because that you have this commonality, then sustainable development could become a collaborative law, as an example. And the story emphasizes the importance of how two knowledge systems respect each other's differences and collaborate on common values and principles. Next. Okay, at the no voice perspective, the model started with a 9-government roundtable planning exercise for caribou in the southern lakes of the Yukon, where 80% of the Yukon population is living, and you have 3 small herds whose home range is dwindling or becoming smaller because of the human presence. And these 9 governments, Canada, BC, and Yukon, 5 First Nation treaty governments, and 1 Northern BC government, Takawa-Trinket, is an exercise to put together a management plan. And this is where I shared TK laws and principles that eventually came back as a 1-page model or concept in which I began to use as the makings of this relationship model. So the no voice perspective represents those affected parties that are not at the table. It includes especially the future generations. You know how people always talk about 7 generations, but now I'm beginning to see, because of climate change, we should be talking at least 15 generations, which will be closer to 1,000 years rather than 500. It includes non-human relations, also Mother Earth. Mother Earth meaning land and also water. And the Longo people's approach to land relationship and care include all affected parties' perspective in planning and decision making. So the model includes those with no voice in all discussions and decision making made at the round table, and their presence is represented with a symbol or a sign. A no voice contribution could be the critical factor in the final decision making. So that's just a photo of the empty chair behind this photograph, taken at one of the Southern Lakes Caribou steering committee meetings. And the caribou was given the name dwellers. So as you go around the table, you have nine chairs around the round table. And then the caribou would be the 10th chair. So as you go around the table, giving your input on the decision, the discussion or the issue that's being discussed on the table at that time, the caribou's input is also included. So we ask the question, what do we feel is the caribou's feelings towards that decision on the table? And it's recorded. And if there's a tie, then the caribou input becomes critical in that decision making. And that comes from the old people's way when they're talking about managing and talking about the non-human dwellers on the land. Sometimes you would have one elder that speaks for the animals in question. In this case, the model says that an extra chair should be set aside for the no voice perspective. Thank you. Next slide. The knowledge stream tree is a story of how two knowledge systems and worldviews could function collaboratively, side by side, without one trying to dominate the other. The watershed framework of the stream tree consists of tributaries or branches that allow life-giving water or knowledge to flow into the main waterway or trunk. The area between the banks above the water I call is the sacred space needed for meaningful dialogue to take place. And next. Whoops, okay. That's just to show different knowledge concepts or models that I picked up on the internet. One is the Venn diagram that everybody uses, including myself, that shows overlapping and common interests in regards to TK and Western science. I included also the IISAAK from the IISAAK concept from the Micmacs and Cape Breton University. The braiding of the two knowledge system was from Robin, as I mentioned here on the slide, and I included the knowledge stream tree. And if I can just explain a bit, that you see the dark lines across the narrow tributaries indicating bridges, that this is what I mentioned, that in these narrows, collaboration is possible. The example I gave you was sustainable development, where you have TK on one side of the stream and Western knowledge on the other side. I don't advocate a merger of any kind in the sense of a forced merger at this time, because to my way of thinking, climate change will do that for us. Climate change will create this third type of knowledge system, which I call collaborative knowledge. And a good example of that is that pandemic that's happening right now. Right now, people have to learn that they have to collaborate and work together in order to learn to address and also to respect the coronavirus. Again, back to the diagram, the sacred space over water. What I did there was just to kind of give you the feeling of the vulnerability, I guess, in regard to the sacred space, that has to be treated with the highest care and respect as possible from those participants that are around the round table. Okay, next. Rules of engagement of how you're going to come together and use the model. I'm saying that the participants of the round table are responsible for developing their own rules of engagement, but should include the following requirements: that you should show respect to each other, but the affected parties, the land and water. You should feel as much as you think. Here, a lot of people use their own intelligence, their own brain work to be able to figure out the world. In the First Nation and Indigenous way, we allow our heart to begin to communicate and understand from the other energies that is around us, as everything in the universe has energies from the sun, that it begins to have that communication and interpretation with those energy sources around us, which makes it more easier, because it's easier to receive than to force your way out into the world. And this is the way that the First Nation peoples communicate. Listen to understand what has been said. As I mentioned before, I had to listen to understand for 30 years before I became a storyteller. I had to listen to my dad on the land at 5 years old, when I became 35, he said, okay, you tell the stories. You heard it enough times. And I began to tell the stories at pot lodges and large gatherings. He would sit there beside me up in front, and a few times he would stop me and interrupt, and he would say, you got to go back and fix that part. I didn't tell you that. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to change the story? So I had to go back and fix it and come forward again. And too often today, people listen not to understand, but they listen to respond. It's a different kind of a way to think now, especially if you're dealing with multiple knowledge systems or ways of life or understanding. It's important to clarify what you say and hear, because now you're going to go into two different complex systems. You need to have patience. And again, some of the questions you're going to deal with are going to be complex and deep. So this is where the care, share, respect comes out again. You as an individual representing your side or your culture or your people, then have to take care of the other party across the table to bring them down so that you would both understand what you're talking about. So this is where you have to make sure that they understand what you're saying, because their way of thinking is different. And you have to ask them, can you tell me what you heard me say? And then if it's different, then you're going to have to explain it a different way to make sure you both have that same understanding. Okay, next. Projects been used in the model. It's using the model presently. I mentioned to you the Sun Lakes Caribou Steering Committee. They've been using the model now for the last 2 years. An offshoot from the caribou work. The model also is used in caribou in schools, in which we're designing a guidebook for educators or teachers in the southern schools. The Yukon Mineral Development Strategy has invited the model to participate with them, and we did a 2-day workshop with the panel. We meaning the elders representing all the different linguistic regions in the Yukon. One Health Declaration, Arctic Eon Rose Research, and Pellybanks First Nation Government Guidelines. And the last one is Yukon First Nation Wildfires have just invited us to put together a proposal for them in regards to a guardianship or protection and training their young people in regards to being protectors of the land. So I want to thank Jared Prophet for that invitation. And also I just got an invitation from it's called the Brooklyn Botanical Garden. They've asked me to do a session such as I'm sharing with you folks here with their teachers down in Brooklyn. So is that in the state of New York, I guess. Okay, next slide. So Southern Lakes Caribou Steering Committee, 9 government roundtable experts directed to develop a caribou management plan. As I mentioned, it constitutes 80% of the Yukon population. 3 small caribou herds, rangeland is shrinking. And however, we notice in a nice way that the caribou numbers are increasing because there's been a hunting ban back since the early 1990s. And as we speak, a draft plan has been written to be completed by the spring of 2021. And the planning project of the Caribou Management Plan is First Nation led. Next, please. Caribou in schools, as I mentioned, dealing with Southern Lakes educator. As you can see, the land, humans, and caribou relationship. And again, a sacred space is formed. And this slide, I just wanted to show some of the contents in the guidebook. Share Care Respect is fostering a sense of stewardship and collaboration, respect, centered around community level management of Southern Lakes caribou. The no voice perspective is that engaging with this concept in age appropriate ways at all grade levels. So the guidebook is trying to accommodate educators from grade 1 to grade 12. The knowledge stream tree in creating space for students to make community decisions after gathering information from multiple source, TK and Western science data. So just to give you some idea of the content, the planning process for the Caribou in schools, which is very similar to what I mentioned in regards to the Southern Lakes caribou. We're about to now go and interview elders from the 6 affected communities, and they would be the ones that would be inputting TK into this guidebook, and also to make sure that they would be the ones to tell the stories once that they come to these lessons in the classroom. Okay, next slide. The Community Development Strategy, again, I have to thank them for inviting us, mining us on one side, and here we're dealing with TK from the other side of the spectrum. And our commonality we saw here was that the best way is this triple bottom line model where, similar to us, the environment is the outer shell, society, and then the economy is inside the 3 shells or lines. And this is how, in regards to the Share Care Respect, has parallels with the triple bottom line, in which we respect our environment, we care for our society, and we share in our economy. And as I mentioned, that we did a 2-day workshop with the panel in which we covered questions that would be very applicable in regards to TK on the land, how the land reacts to mining, and what could be done in regard to successor legislation to happen in the Yukon. Next slide. One Health, we started off with, after using the model as a baseline in regard to TK, we began to develop a declaration for Yukon First Nations, and has evolved into a One Health Yukon Declaration that starts with the founding on Indigenous knowledge. So as you can see here, this One Health concept that is global. You have human health, environmental health, and animal health as One Health. And in human health, you have your public health authorities. Environmental health, you have your environmental scientists, and you have your veterinarians in regard to animal health. The critical component of this relationship, we felt, was the TK holders. The TK holders are the ones that hold those indigenous or traditional knowledge, and that component has to be inside the One Health. And we say that traditional knowledge is the foundation of One Health, and that's where it has to start from. Next slide, please. I just wanted to share the result of our One Health work. We had put together a short letter hoping to get that published in one of the prestigious science journals. And I was happy to, and very surprised that they published it in their September 25th, 2020 issue. and the information here if you wish to Google it. But again, we had to thank the Science Journal, because the editor to come forward and to open up to accept the argument that traditional knowledge is the foundation of One Health. So you can see we had a maximum of 500 words, and she whittled us down to 350. However, the message that we had stayed intact. So instead of the foundation, TK knowledge underlines One Health, to me meant the same thing. So I said, yes, let's take it. And, we've been getting a lot of media coverage, and also doing a lot of interviews in regards to this one letter. So CBC and local newspapers, and a couple of days ago was APTN, and now we're doing some talks with the local scientists. So it's opened up a lot of avenues in regards to the intention and the openness and the goodwill between a quite conservative science journal to come forward to say, okay, we will print and publish your commentary. Next, please. This one, Pellybanks First Nation, is one of the First Nations or Indian bands that was acknowledged back in the early 1900s. However, in 1956 were amalgamated due to administration concerns of IISAAK. So they became part of the Ross River Dene Council. And recently, they have been making movements to go back to their homeland. They're located about 100 kilometers south of Ross River. And in their founding meeting that was held at the beginning of August, they decided, no, we're not going to become an Indian band. They said no to the Indian status. They said, we will keep our traditional governance. We will not have elections. And why they say that is because they want to maintain their Aboriginal rights and lands. And the model was picked by them because it can accommodate different scenarios in regards to collaborative planning, and conflict resolution, negotiation with government and business. So they said this model will become our government guidelines of how business will be conducted in their traditional territory. So it's a big step, and also I'm sure that governments and industry is going to be hearing about the model, because the good thing what they saw in the model was that at least you start at a 50-50 baseline, not one-sided as it always has been dealing with resources. They're saying this is our land, so therefore this is the way we're going to entertain and do business. Next slide. Yukon, this is the wildfires. Yeah, it's interesting because they asked us to do a proposal. So this is what it's going to look a bit like from our discussion with Jordan Prophet. Jordan is Nacho descendant. Share, care, respect, they want instilled in the land protector practitioners. So right now it's going to be their wildfire fighters. And the traditional knowledge shall be shared as the baseline. So time will be spent with elders on the land, sharing of stories, plant use, bush skills, learning of in community settings throughout the different seasons, and to include cultural burning methods and fire drill practices. So I'm sure we might be asking Russ to come north and share some of his Dasiqox methods in dealing with wildfires. Okay, next please. Okay, now we come to the question of how does the model fit into the IPCA process. And as Stephen mentioned, that the Nitah agreement, I kind of use that as the prototype or the example. And seeing and reading that agreement, it quickly became quite evident, as most agreements in Canada are pretty well fundamentally Western style, that emphasizes on dispute and conflict resolution and neglects relationship building. And I say this because in that agreement, at least 5 pages were conflict resolution provisions, and 3 sentences or provisions were set aside for relationship building. A relationship needs to be woven into the entire process, start to finish. So because that relationship is a way of life for Indigenous peoples as compared to conflict and conflict resolution. An example I always give in the North is that I always tell people, wouldn't you want to meet a friend than an enemy if you're walking down the trail at 60 below? It's just common sense. You would want to meet a friend because you'd want to be helping one another. And that's the whole approach for First Nations, is that even dealing with boundaries, Canada's bottom line has always been contiguous boundaries in their modern treaty making, and also elections, which may have negative effects to Indigenous peoples. So in this case, the relationship model is set up to create the framework for healthy relationships to be integral part of the agreements. So what I'm saying here is that if we, okay, I'll explain the next slide then maybe. Okay, here, that's a good one. Okay, thank you. So if we can look at, as we say, land relationship planning is a living process. So you have your planning board, or in this case, yeah, it would be between GNWT, Parks Canada, and Nitah and Xeni. And they then, from their agreements, is mandated to begin to set up a management plan and then an operational plan. So under the model, the key link between TK and Western science is this TK holder circle. And this is from my hands-on experience of all the projects I'm working on with the model. The critical link is the TK and elder circle, because they would be the only ones that have that consent to say, yes, you can use this, or no, you cannot use that. And also that they are that link that has been broken in the past. And so a lot of care and attention has been placed on this link, to the point of actually drafting knowledge agreements or consent forms that would, are upheld under the UNDRIP or OCAP principles. But it's with the individual TK holder for them to give their permission for the information or knowledge they share to be used in this project. And even at the end result of the project, for example, I gave you an illustration of caribou in schools and the guidebooks. So once the guidebooks are produced, then that guidebook has to go back to the elders to get their consent in that format. So this is where this relationship between TK and Western science can happen. And from my hands-on experience of dealing with various projects here in the Yukon. So with that, also a good way too was, say Dan and Nana said if one or two individuals, let's say at least one on the planning board would be a TK holder or elder, then that would be the link between the planning board and your TK advisory circle. And then you get down to your land relationship plan or management plan that is put together based on your rules of engagement and TOR, terms of reference from your agreement. You would produce your management plan for the IPA, and then moving over to operations or implementation. And you will see that you have a land stewardship curriculum and on the land teaching. So again, this is similar to what I just shared with in regards to Yukon wildfires. They're wanting a land stewardship or land guardianship program or curriculum. And this could be, again, between TK holders and also your educational institutions. That could help in regards to putting together these programs. So now you have your operation plan, and you're going to have your game guardians on the land over to plan review, and then you would continue on with this living process. What I see here is that from the TK holders' input into this overall planning process, and also this development of this land protector program, that your game guardians, or sorry, not game guardians, land guardians, becomes that critical link in the process in the future, because you're beginning to train and educate actual TK holders. And because if they're the ones that are on the land all the time, watching the changing of landscape due to climate change, then why not they be the ones to begin to not only monitor, but also ensure that there's conformity to whatever stipulations are applied to that land from your IPAs, or in this case, from your land relationship plan. You need to have conformity to that plan in regards to how you zone out or designate that plan. Okay, next. Okay, use the relationship model as a tool. As I said, the model is a building tool. I like to refer kind of like a hammer. You take a hammer to build. You start from the foundation or basement. You work your way up, put a floor on. You're going to put your frame, house frame, and you build onto it. So I say that the model is a relationship building tool rather than a dispute resolution mechanism. I say this as my preference. However, it's also designed to mediate conflicts if it has to in regards to treaty making, etc. It's built from the ground up and from a TK baseline to a collaborative end plan. And even, I say, starting from the beginning through terms of reference or rules of engagement stage, using the model, you also at the same time can start from the end. Starting from the end, meaning what is the end result that you want to achieve? What is this friendly solution that you're trying to achieve? And then ask the questions and work backwards as you're moving forward from the beginning. So it can take part in all levels and also all phases of a planning process. And I like this in regards to the agreement where care, share, respect is well described in that working together clause. Collaborations agreed to with emphasis on the Nanasulane way of life. And in that any relationship clauses allows a model to achieve friendly solutions for animals and the Lusokhi Nanasulane way of life in Nene. And as I mentioned before, that knowledge holder circle is a critical link between TK and Western science within the planning process. Next slide. Yeah, I thought that, could that be moved upwards a bit, a little bit? So we can catch the bottom people here. Oh, okay, it's a little awful.
Sorry, I think that's all I can do with the screen share.
Okay. Anyways, the elders on the right is Tisloa Smith, and Tisloa is the Crow Clan chief for the Pellybanks First Nation. And they're the ones that have adopted the model as a government guideline. And the young lady in the middle here is Erin Nicolardi. She is my co-worker in developing the Caribbean schools. So she's an on-land educator and has an education background. People at the bottom, you can barely see. You can see the tall fella though. That's Jared Gannett. Jared is Taku River Trinket. And the lady next to Jared would be Dr. Katerina Nowak. And you can see myself with the white buffalo horns, all masked. And that lady at the end would be Selkirk First Nation and Mies. We just had taken our picture in front of the Friendship Totem Pole in Whitehorse after our letter was published. So this was the co-authors of that science journal letter writing exercise. And at the same time, Jared is the writer now for the Southern Lakes Caribou Management Plan. And Dr. Noad, who's with CPAWS, and Ann Mies is with CPAWS. She was instrumental in working with the One Health Declaration we put together. And also was negotiating for us so that our letter didn't dwindle down to a couple of sentences. She did a good job. And myself, so yes. Okay, and next slide. Okay, so yeah, Masicho and Ganeshation. Shonithan. Thank you, and I look forward to the questions. Ganeshation.
All right, Masicho, Copperjoe, reading the comments. There are some questions that we'll get to later, but there's a lot of appreciation expressed in the comment section for your presentation, a lot of interest. I think it's helping to clarify what land relationship means and could mean within IPCAs. In fact, land relationship planning, the first time I heard that term was in January of 2018, or was it November of 2017? It was at the ILI workshop in Ottawa on guardians, and the role of guardians could be land use planning. And I use that term in leading one of the breakout groups. And I have to acknowledge and credit a young lady by the name of Simca Martin from Tlaquet, from the Tofino area, Chano's individual, daughter of the great canoe carver Joe Martin. When I indicated Indigenous guardians can help develop land use plans, and she said, I don't like that term. The term use leads to abuse. We should be using the term land relationship planning. And as part of the Indigenous Circle of Experts report, we rise together. One of the recommendations is that land use planning needs to be redone, should be redone. And part of the transformational opportunities that we have today to create a better tomorrow post-pandemic is to revisit some of the language we use. And I think the land relationship planning can be a lot healthier. We use that and replace land use planning. And just to the no voice representation that you speak of, in the Thaidin Establishment Agreement, there's a Thaidin conservation area that's created between Tlitsile and the Government Northwest Territories. It's in the northernmost part of Thaidin. In the agreement, we give the voice to the caribou. And we said this is a caribou wintering area, and only the caribou can tell us if they will continue needing this winter area. And when they tell us, we'll use traditional knowledge and Western science to determine that. And that's when we can get changes if the caribou tell us they don't need that wintering area as a conservation area anymore. So here's an example of how life could be given to concepts. Without further ado, let's go to Mr. Chief Ross. Chief.
Great. I'm no longer chief though, so I'll introduce myself as Russell Myers Ross.
Once a chief, always a chief.
I served as a chief for Yunesit'in Government for 8 years since 2012, and just ended here in September. But I'm a contractor now for the Dasiqo team, and also for Yunesit'in Government. I just want to introduce myself as a Dasiqo team person, and my mother was born in Yunesit'in. She passed away a few years ago, and my grandmother Helena is from Xeni Gwet'in, from the community that Marilyn Baptiste is from. And yeah, I'm just going to try to set everything up from the work we did with Dasiqo, so Marilyn can explain the NIN planning piece. So I'm going to switch to a slide. I hope nobody judges me here. This is mostly, oh, can everyone see that?
Awesome.
So I just slapped these slides together. They're mostly just pictures, and really I just want to give the audience a glimpse of what the territory looks like, and a bit of the struggle that we went through to form. So we call it Dasiqox Tribal Park originally, announced in 2014, right after the Supreme Court of Canada decision. But we also call it Nahwakwalan, and it refers to it's there for us. These pictures, I just wanted to, this came from some of our comprehensive community planning work, but just wanted to highlight what our community is all about. And when I think of our identity, usually people kind of reference their identity very close to horses and the river. So I want to share a little bit of the landscape there. These are shot from above Yunesit'in. So this is what our community looks like before and after the fires, it looks like in that shot. This is Toltambi. This is the area that we've invested in a lot of time to protect. This area was slated to be essentially drained, a tailings pond and a mining pit near and close to this area. This is in the same area, Toltambi. Ended up building a cabin in 2015, and yeah, just showing presence with having sweats and ceremonies happening consistently on a yearly basis. And then this is just sort of snapshot of the territory And really what I want to show is like the story of conflict in a way. It's a beautiful place. It's a place of spirituality, place where our ancestors lived and are buried, and had like, winter houses, place of stories. One of our origin stories, Dasiqox, kind of close to the Dasiqo area, and stories of animals, and a place where we collect food and have built livelihoods around. So this is a snapshot of the proposed mine. We went through 2 rounds of environmental assessments. I think once in 2010 and then another 2013. So those were the South Gutine invested a lot of energy into trying to prevent, and have been successful. This is just a snapshot of the red lines there are the declared title lands that were accepted in the Supreme Court of Canada in June 26th of 2014. And then the purple hatch lines is sort of the area that we sort of identified for the Dasiqox Tribal Park. Part of it was to, and you don't see the affirmed rights area, but some of it's in that hatched purple area. But the idea was that, once it was declared, was to essentially say that the rest of our territory is important. This is, this is still a special place for us. It's still, still needs to be protected. We're not just protected by having title in a certain area, or nor do the parklands necessarily protect us. So it's just trying to affirm that this place was special. So here's some slides. I think it's just the conflict itself, like the rallies we've had, even having to roadblock and gather strength by bringing people and organizations to support us. It's a glimpse of Tiltambi in the winter, doing a ceremony in preparation to some of our campaign. And this is a couple pictures just of the roadblock that we did, I think a year ago, to stop drilling permit from happening. But yeah, I just wanted to show those pictures just to show that it's a source of conflict. But I think, for the first part of it, we were never included in the provincial Caribou Chilcotin land use plans. So there's been an era of denial in terms of accepting our title. It was roughly 25 years from the start of the title decision to the end in 2014, and then the mining exploration and mining interests have heightened that tension. I think to the point where we recognized the Crown was granting authority without our consent, and we'd never relinquished any of our land without treaty, or to treaty at all. And I think at one point, like in 2012, 2013, there was a pressure from municipal, provincial, federal government, and just local people in general. They, I think the anticipation was that we would accept the mine, but for us, we kept rejecting it, and then they asked, like, what if not a mine, then what do you want? So it kind of forced us to be put ourselves in a responsible position to go in and explaining exactly what we wanted. So some of our first steps, and this is when Marilyn was chief, one of our first steps was just like building an inventory and pulling together documents and reports that just to acknowledge that we're not starting from scratch, that we had all this knowledge, all the stuff that we worked on in the court cases, and try to honor all those things, and then developed a bit of a strategic report, and just to give leadership some direction on which way to go and where to put our resources. So we were able to get, you know, proposals started, and started working in terms of getting people and some of our projects underway. And then we invested in a large envisioning exercise where we had about 70 people interviewed extensively, individuals and groups of people, and documented it well. And I think the idea was that we were going to develop a public outreach. So we packaged it all, and then we started sharing it to the public, because we want to build legitimacy, not just within our communities, but more broadly within the local area and for Canadians in general, because we were really looking for you know, just creating something that everybody could be involved with and not feel excluded or not feel like left out. So we had so we opened this up to government, to industry. We opened up to the public, did public sessions in Williams Lake and other places, and then we took the feedback to incorporate them into the planning piece. And then so far we have you know, the vision document that's completed, and then the management plan we have underway. So we're sort of at a point. We're at a point where we've got a management plan underway. We're doing 2 documents, an internal one more for our communities, and then an external one for kind of the wider public. And then we're taking some time to incorporate some of our traditional laws. So we didn't do a lot of that at the beginning, and so we're taking some time to do interviews with elders and to try to draw on some of the material that we had before. On the governance side, it was a little bit rocky when we started. We, you know, I think in the end we ended up deciding that would be the core 2 councils from each community. So Xeni Gwet'in and Yunesit'in, and then we developed right away. We developed a shared protocol agreement just to make sure that we're committed to each other and that we have a bit of a sort of a relationship of how we would, if we had an argument, how would we go about talking to each other. Then we developed an internal governance protocol just to make sure we had the lines of communication and authority. So this was, you know, outside of our own councils. We're trying to do a little bit of nation building and trying to include a different governing system and one that wasn't as part of our tribal council either. So I think, you know, leading all this, we led the way in trying to develop, you know, essentially our own process, and it's led to the South Gwet'in Nation that's developed in the NEN planning, and you know, a lot of this work that Marilyn's sort of taking on is sort of a continuity of all the work that we started. So I'll leave it there, but yeah, thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you, Russell. I appreciate your presentation. Because we're running out of time, we'll go directly to Marilyn to continue the story of the Dasiqox Tribal Park. Before I go there, I just wanted to throw in a little humor. You know, I don't go to parks much, but when I do, I go to Dasiqox. Marilyn.
Hi all, I'm going to keep my video off just because my internet is not the greatest. But thank you all, and very amazing and important work that we see here. I just want to give thanks to our Creator, our ancestors, for providing us our space wherever we are, and also giving thanks to our opening with Copper and the amazing presentation by Copper as well as Russ. Really important in this process to be able to share our work. I'm just trying to bring up my PowerPoint unless Allison is going to.
Again,
And
no
again,
problem.
I'm trying to do this and it doesn't, oh, wait a minute, let me see, I might be able to do it. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I don't want. Hold on. Oops. What did I do? So basically, I just want to say a little bit about the CRP, not the CRP, but more specifically the We Rise Together report to Canada, which is really important in this process. The Indigenous Circle of Experts had handed over the report We Rise Together to Minister McKenna in March of 2018, the day after our war chiefs were exonerated in the House. To me, that is really extremely important because these two things are tied together in that our land planning, our bringing back and reviving our laws of the lands that were handed down from our ancestors is a part of all of this Indigenous protected and conserved areas, as Copper and Russ had expressed in their presentations as well. So it's really important to me in just noting that. I also will just touch a bit about our Inenkai and governance processes within the Dasiqox Tribal Park that Russ and our communities are a part of, as well as water, because water is very extremely important, as we are all made up of 70 to 80% of water, and so is Mother Earth. That is our tie. And this is just, oops, that was Russ's time. Boy, Russ, you did a good job. Sorry about that. Start my time. And that is just Telton. And of course, through the report We Rise Together, what was really important with our elders' guidance, Elder Reg Crosshoe presenting the ethical space along with Danica Little Child, it was important because ethical space in this process is about our two ways coming together, working together, and knowing and learning together, agreeing what our relationship is, and acknowledging all of our history and different aspects such as, UNDRIP, our FPIC, free, prior, and informed consent, through the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, international standards. That's really important. The key piece of this whole process is Indigenous led. And this is some of our leaders at Telton in the heart of our Dasiqox Tribal Park. And a part of key being Indigenous led, I always like to share the fact that, when we were looking at how do we protect Telton and our waters and our lands from this impact of the Prosperity Mine, copper and gold mine, our elders, we went and we brought Class A park, a conserved area and tribal park examples. We brought them to our two communities, and our elders didn't want to hear about anything. They just said tribal park. It needs to be Indigenous led. That was the importance in the whole process, and it's key. And I just share here some of these are elders, our family on the left, late Joseph William and his siblings, they were all raised at Little Fish Lake, and their homelands would have been destroyed completely and forever. And they have been very strong in this fight and the process and guidance. So we're very thankful. And just basically, you know, in this process of Indigenous-led, Indigenous protected and conserved areas, it can be tribal park, it can be however the communities want to see it. It could be just protected areas. It's up to the communities. And it's there for us, as Russ said. Dasiqox Tribal Park was set aside as a space to revive our ways on the land with the land, and providing our teachings, continue to provide the strength and the honor of our teachings to our children and our future generations, as Copperjoe noted. I agree, we need to look 15 years ahead, not 7 years ahead. And this benefits all of this work with Indigenous-led protected and conserved areas, benefits all Canadians in all ways. To be able to work with the land, with Mother Earth, and provide for our future generations benefits all of us. With the Dasiqox Tribal Nation and our governance process and land or Nankai process, with governance, we are working on our constitution, Dasiqox Tribal Park, and that is reviving our laws of the lands and waters. And the biggest part of that always is to acknowledge, and for us all to realize, as our people say, we've always had our governance. It was just never written down because we're not a paper people. That's the Euro way. The Constitution, our people don't understand, but the Chens Adiltan, our people understand. And of course, it's the same thing. It's just bringing these together in two-eyed seeing to be able to bring that understanding together, which is a part of creating that ethical space so that we can work successfully together for the future of all. And with Nankai planning process, it is about the same. It's the creating or reviving the laws, the policies and guidelines and bylaws to protect our lands and our waters first, our wildlife, our way of life, and for our future generations. And just simply being able to revive our reconciliation with ourselves, with our lands and our waters. That's a part of the healing that our people continue to go through every day. And a lot of times, as is noted, we are always brought together in conflict since the beginning of contact. And the other day, I was in another webinar where it was noted that when, at the time of contact, our people had, Indigenous people had welcomed the newcomers, and they showed them the way on the land to survive in our territories, in our lands, all of Turtle Island, all of North America. And just simply, it's about being able to, whoops, my slides are not moving. It's simply being able to listen to the lands and the waters, as well as one of my lead on governance, Shawnee Palmatier, has learned from one of our elders. The animals also have their own constitution, their own Dechens Adifan. So we need to recognize those things as Copperjoe, voice that in the no voice piece that was really important and very crucial. These are very high up in the mountains, in the Dasiqo Mountains, where the waters flow into the Dasiqo Lakes. I don't know if this will work. I'll give it a shot. This is one of our sacred gatherings there. We've been doing, Cecil Grinder has been leading a sacred camp there in Sweats each year. And of course, some of our elders. And I just want to say that, you know, our elders, it doesn't matter if they don't have much or they don't have almost anything in the sense of money for travel. When we gather, they get there, and that's where they are happy to be gathering on the land with each other. And of course, just a bit more of, and I want to just say in regards to the We Rise Together report that is important in this process. There are a lot of recommendations that begin on page 56, and of course you can Google that, We Rise Together, and you will find it. The first recommendation is that all governments adopt the shared, conserved, and protected areas and ethical space. And it is up to us to do that work, to make that happen. But more importantly, in my mind, and what I've learned throughout my years and from my late dad, is it is up to us to simply carry out our ways in our territories on the land and water, continue to protect and pass on our teachings to our people, to our children, for that continued protection. And this is a part of our allies they flew into Fish Lake. That was an interesting. Chief Bob Chamberlain would share such crazy stories. He was on that plane. But that is what it's all about, is our just doing it. And I heard that yesterday as well, is just do it, get out there and do it. So, and of course, through the CRP, we are working on a solutions bundle that will help people in these steps of setting out your protected areas. So thank you very much.
All right, merci too, Marilyn. We are running out of time, and we don't have much time for questions at this point in time, but it is important to get at least one question in. So I asked both Justine and Allison to provide me with a question that's coming from the chat. The question that they put forward is for Copper. The question, Copper, is can you talk a bit more about how the no voice perspective is brought into the room? As a wildlife conservation scientist, we explicitly speak for caribou as experts, but I'm not sure caribou think and feel like a scientist, and probably have some thoughts about being designated as resources. Can you talk about how your description, how you can describe and frame this idea with school children? From WCS Canada.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a very good question in the sense of opening up that worldview and also discussion in regards to how different people look at the same thing differently. In regards to the caribou from our way, that, as I mentioned, the old people way, when they're sitting around the campfire to discuss about game or managing of their traditional territory in ancient times, I hear that some of the elders have to be there solely representing the caribou or representing whatever particular game they're talking about. So it's a different concept in a sense of a different way of thinking. You have to, as I mentioned, learn to understand, listen to understand, because this is a different kind of worldview than scientists. And if I notice, even in regards to the 9-government roundtable for the Southern Lakes Caribou, I sometimes say, well, I have to tell them, well, we got to make sure that we don't bring our policies to the table, because we all carry our policies in our back pocket. But at the table, we have to be neutral, because the bottom line here is the caribou. And what is the issue we're talking about here is shrinking rangeland. So maybe we have to have a different attitude in regards to caribou in this place, because of the pressures and restrictions placed on the caribou. They can take care of themselves without our interference. So now that we're interfering, what do we do about it? We may have to change a different type of attitude towards caribou. Instead of hunting them, in the wintertime or in springtime, they're looking for their lichens under the lodgepole pine forest. And if they're in your backyard, then you got to make sure you bring your dogs in, sort of thing, because now you're neighbors, because you're living in the same space, and we have a different kind of relationship. And that relationship begins to that relationship brings out the old-time way in regards to respect. Everything we do, like I mentioned, in regards to the model and the old people way has to do with relationships.
Thank you very much, Copper, for that answer. And I think that's a nice segue into wrapping up this session of the webinar. Relationships. It's all about relationships, folks. Everything we do is about relationships. It's about relationships with each other, our personal relationship with our history and the knowledge systems that history provides, and our responsibility to carry it forward in respect, to share that knowledge and be open-minded to other knowledge systems, and trying to come up with a more effective knowledge system so that we could develop better relationships, healthier relationships. I think today's discussion clearly articulated the Indigenous worldview, that same worldview that is maintaining 80% of the remaining biodiversity on Earth. We heard a great presentation by Copper on the use of land and people relationship planning model. We heard from Russ and Marilyn about the Dasiqox Tribal Park and the challenges that they went through in creating Dasiqo, the challenges they still face. I think it's important to recognize that if Indigenous peoples and their governments work with provincial and territorial governments and the federal government in developing land relationship plans in each territory, we could avoid those type of conflicts, be more intentional about respecting special places that all Indigenous communities have in their territories, and using the best of each other's knowledge systems to create a better tomorrow, to maintain economies, to maintain relationship with territories, and to maintain a relationship with each other. I think your diagram speaks thousands of words that I can't express right now, and I thank you for that, Copper. And I think the message coming from our friends in Xeni Gwet'in and Russ's community of working together, sharing together, learning together, and caring together is an important message that that's coming from IPCAs right across the country. Those are some of the main themes that I'm hearing from Indigenous communities, that we want to be able to protect our special places where we can continue being who we are, so that we can share can share who we are in our knowledge system with the mosaic of the human family. I think this pandemic and the fact that we're in the midst of a changing climate because of our humans' actions is showing us that the world we live in is finite, and that we need to learn from the best that are managing those resources within the different territories across the world. In my people's religion, for an example, we say Nuhtsine. Nuhtsine. That's how we describe our creator. Nu in my language is an island. Tsine means the person or the creator of that island. Even within our territories, we treat our territories like it's an island, and there's a finite resources. And I think we better start treating Mother Earth as an island, as we would an island on any of our given lakes. And, an island, doesn't matter how big of an island it is, you still have finite resources, and you have to manage those finite resources to ensure the continuation of life. And I think IPCAs in this country and land relationship planning and creating IPCAs gives us that beacons of teachings right across the country, where the best of knowledge systems can be shared and nurtured. And in contributing to that discussion, continuing discussion, I thank you all for presenting, to the many people that participated on the webinar. I thank all the folks that came on the webinar to learn and to share, and I hope you continue following our series of webinars around IPCAs, IPCA Governance, and innovating Indigenous laws into IPCAs, creation of IPCAs, IPCA Governance, and let's see what we can create across the country with different IPCAs. Potential here is great. The stars are aligning. We just need to create the political will to get it done. And I think, correctly done IPCAs can not only be beacons of teachings, but also the basis of conservation economies that can provide good, healthy lives for communities that are hard pressed in getting jobs these days. So that could be one of our contributions to revitalizing the Canadian economy as well. So with that, I say masicho, and we'll see you, most of you sometime next week. I think we're doing the innovating ways of innovative Indigenous laws, and we're going to be focusing on Saijan and Yene. Mr. Larry Ennis and myself will be hosting that. All right, masicho. Have a good day. Take care. Wash your hands. 6 muskrats are 1 caribou apart.